Hey guys, it's Eric from foundersbeta.com, and today I'm here with James from StartFast. It's an accelerator in Syracuse, New York. Right, James?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Eric. Good
Yeah,
to
so thanks so much for being with us. Can you tell us a little bit about StartFast Accelerator and why it's so exciting? We hear a lot of great things down there.
well, thanks. I appreciate it. Um, so, StartFast really exists to help founders turn their startups into the extraordinary companies that we know they're envisioning for their startup. And our entire management team are founders themselves. So we get what it's like to be there in the trenches, whether you're in an incubator or like working out of your parents' garage or whatever. We understand that it's really hard running a company and wanted to create a support mechanism to help founders do that, both in terms of mentorship and investment. So we have over 100 mentors in our network that get this too. They're serial entrepreneurs, they're investors, there's corporate executives, there's subject matter experts that are all working with us on a purely volunteer basis to help companies. So the way we work is we scour the globe, mostly through the internet, really, looking at probably 5,000 companies this year, and we pick 5 to work with. So the 5 that come in, we provide them with $25,000 investment up front for 7% common stock. So we're basically kind of taking a minority co-founder position, essentially. And then we have a 12-week accelerator program where myself, our management team, all of our mentors are really there to help them accelerate that early market traction, establish a scalable business model, and go on to raise that next round of funding so that when they're coming out, we can help to either lead or participate in larger follow-on rounds of investment.
That sounds amazing. And can you tell us a little bit about what kind of startups do you have in the accelerator, or what kind of startups are you looking for mostly?
So from like a 10,000 foot sort of view, we're industry agnostic. We work exclusively with tech companies, which basically means a scalable business built around software or hardware. We look for teams with multiple full-time co-founders that have complementary skill sets. And in terms of the stage of the business, in my opinion, the beauty of working with just 5 companies is really kind of twofold. And this sort of speaks to the business stage, which is that it means we can provide every company with a lot of attention to work directly with ourselves, our mentors. We don't have classes of 50 startups, so we like to, really work with people who kind of understand that they're not being run through, a very regimented program. They want to work directly with us, and they kind of buy into that co-founder mentality. And the second is we tailor specifically to each individual company's needs. So it's not like we're working with a very specific filter of what companies are coming in. We've had people come in that haven't raised any money before, haven't had any revenue, up to ones that have raised over $1 million or even had $1 million in revenue before. But the common theme among them is that they're struggling either to scale their growth in sales, build out their operations or supply chain, and raise larger rounds of funding. So that in any case, our goal is to help these companies kind of get past those challenges and really reach that inflection point on the hockey stick in terms of their growth.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. And it looks like you have more like personalized approach to companies, right? It's a smaller set of companies, right? And it sounds like more like niche and like kind of get that personalized help that startups need as opposed to like bigger scale. And because I think in a lot of programs too, it's too big. You might be just a number in the batch, whatever they call it, right? So I feel like this is more personalized, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, there's a lot of great brands out there and investors, and, we love those guys. It's awesome what they're doing. Our kind of approach is a bit different. We try and work with a small number of companies because we're really try to be founder oriented. I mean, we're in this because we like working with startups. I mean, plain and simple. No larger, huge motive behind all of that. All of our investors get that. So we like to work specifically with smaller amounts of companies that are going to help them. In terms of ways we've done that, we really like to work with companies where we can see a definite match with ourselves or our mentor groups or partners that we have. So we had a company come through called Smarty Pans. They're developing a smart cooking pan with temperature and weight sensors that can like track calories and cookie time and stuff like that. Well, one of our mentors is Jim Joseph, and he was the former CEO of Oneida Limited. They're one of the largest flatware makers in the world. So there was a definite connection there in terms of understanding the market and the supply side and stuff like that. One of our other companies, SpinCar, came through, developed some automotive software that gives you like a 360 view inside and out of cars. It's like interactive and that sort of thing.
Nice.
We hooked him up with John Miller, who had sold 2 different companies in automotive software. And so there was a definite synergy there, and now he sits on the board and all that sort of stuff. We understood all the challenges specific to those industries, or we'll connect with people if it's a sales cycle. We'll connect with people who understand enterprise SaaS, or if it's influencer marketing, we have a lot of people who do really great at like content marketing and social media marketing and that sort of thing. So it allows us to be very specific to the challenges and the problems that anyone's facing, irrespective of like what their industry is,
Right.
or that sort of thing. And even if it's like someone who's, has 15 years of experience in a specific industry, a lot of times they'll come to us and say, look, like I understand automotive manufacturing better than anyone. I just don't know how to build a SaaS business.
That's
And so
true.
we're like, okay, well, we can help you do that aspect of it. So that's one thing I really like about it. Even before I started working for StartFast, when I was sort of an outside person in the ecosystem, I always thought was really cool about what we do.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, you're right at the edge of innovation and creating new companies. I think what can be more exciting than that, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's awesome. Great. And yeah, so I saw you guys are writing some content on startup tips, and you specifically wrote a article on having the right co-founder. And I think this is actually pretty important for our audience out there, right? When you're trying to have that co-founder on board, have the right team. In your opinion, what makes a great co-founder team?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you for the kind words, obviously, and everything. I should also mention, if they want to check out that article specifically, you can find it on our Fast Thoughts blog, which is on our website, startfast.net.
Sure.
I try to write a lot about stuff like this because, frankly, I see a lot of investors or people in the ecosystem writing about things that are really sort of instructional,
Right.
almost as if there's some kind of like odd hierarchy there. But our whole premise is really sympathizing with co-founders and understanding what that's like. And so I try and write about articles and topics that really speak to those specific struggles. So this was a great example of that, where finding a co-founder is a really tricky thing, and there's not necessarily ever one really good answer, but I think there's some decent guidelines. So the first is trying to understand who you're looking for in terms of hard skills. So if you're looking for a CTO or a COO or a CMO or some particular skill set to fill a gap in it, that the most important gaps, I should say, in your team, to understand what that person looks like in terms of their experiences and skill sets and things like that, and ability to learn too, which is really important. I think doesn't really go emphasized enough is you're never going to find someone who knows how to do everything, but you do need to find someone who understands how to learn how to do everything so that you can face
Exactly.
as they come up.
Right.
But it's also important to find someone who has a mindset and kind of understands the work culture of a startup. Like, you're in the early days, there's just no getting around the fact you're going to be making less money and working much harder than you would in a typical day job.
That's so true. I mean, that and in some cases you're not even making any money, right? Like, I mean,
a lot of the time you're not, so it's someone who kind of buys into that sort of longer term investment aspect, but in fact, in many respects, more than that, enjoys working in a startup and starting a business, not just the idea that you're working on. Because
Right.
most of the time, and this kind of speaks to what's important about teams, is especially in the early days, the idea is probably going to change 3 times anyway.
That's
And
so
so
true. That's
it's
so
more
true.
about understanding that iterative process and really loving that aspect of like, well, let me test this out, and what if we tried this, and let me learn why is this the case, and that excitement about the experiment and the learning process and the iterative process is really important, because that's the person who's going to kind of push through and make it through that until they really find that product market fit and can begin to kind of take off. And so those are the teams that we like to work with. I give the example of, I call it the tennis example, which is like, say you get 3 co-founders and they're all like world-class tennis players.
Right.
And they have this awesome innovation in tennis. They're like, this is going to change our industry. It's awesome. We can't wait to get it out there. They go out, they start testing in the marketplace, and they come to find out, man, it turns out it's really golfers who really need this.
That's
9 times out of 10, that team's going to dissolve because they weren't passionate about starting a business. They were passionate about tennis.
Right.
And, you know, it's weird. It's one of those things that's almost counterintuitive, where you'd think, wow, these guys are tennis players. It's a tennis market. It's a tennis idea. It sounds like a great fit. But in many times it isn't, especially in the early stages, because it's going to iterate. And a lot of times that team won't have the passion for pushing the business, but for that industry maybe, or sport or whatever. I hope that answers the question.
Right. Yes. Oh, for sure. I think so. I think a lot of startups too. I think, you know, you go to a startup, you got to have the experimentation mentality, right? Because if you think that your idea right off the bat is going to take off, I think it's probably the people are going to be disappointed, right? Because a lot of times too, even the startups that, you know, we see, it's like they always change from the idea from the beginning to what it is today, or
Yeah.
you know, later. And I think having that ability to, like you said, to reiterate and evolve based on, you know, what the market is looking for, or based on the demands of their users or customers, I think that kind of approach is great to have, because you constantly have to evolve your game and put something out there that there's a need for it, right? So I think that's a fantastic example there.
And you know, on that point too, I actually recently, that you reminded me, I spoke at the Syracuse University recently about this, and my sort of analogy was, if you're starting off with a single idea, you're basically buying a lottery ticket. Whereas if an investor is basically playing Moneyball, and what I mean by that is they're investing in a lot of companies and then doubling down on the ones that are most successful, because they know 99 out of 100 aren't going to make the returns they basically want. But entrepreneurs are in a position where they can actually sort of take advantage of that same concept, where you're trying a lot of different things and then seeing what data you're getting back on that, and doubling down on the most successful methods and ideas and markets and that sort of thing. And you can definitely apply that to an entrepreneurial perspective and do that from an entrepreneur, not just from an investor. And something, you know, as I'm kind of like looking back now in my position, I wish I had recognized when I was an entrepreneur, because it really is. I mean, there's a numbers part of that, but that really emphasizes the iterative process that you have to kind of go on.
I think 100% on that. And I think also, I think the iterative process, I think not just applies to product development, right? But I also think marketing as well, you know, because I think even for marketing channels, customer acquisition, you got to try out different things, you know, whether it's like inbound, whether it's influencer marketing, like you said, or any other ways, even guerrilla marketing, you know, doing flyers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just going out and doing flyers, you know, it can be cheap or whatever tactics, but I think definitely that's also an area for experimentation you know, any startup, I think.
Yeah, you got to try it. I mean, we had a company that literally like hired a guy to like stand in front of football stadiums, like handing out stuff once. And so, I mean, you never know.
There we go.
You got to try. I mean, there's some common sense you got to apply, obviously, too.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that is an analogy that plays throughout the business, not just even in terms of validating idea, but like you said, marketing is a very good salient example.
Right. Right, definitely. For our audience, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are at early stage. They're working on their idea, or they're just about to form their teams. Can you talk about what are some good ways to validate a business idea? So, anything that you would recommend on that?
I mean, the first thing is really a focus on data to begin with. I think a lot of our entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, and I was totally guilty of this myself. Like I ran around in circles for 3 years because I didn't buy into this as much as I should have. Is understanding the fact that like my opinion is pretty darn useless in the grand scheme of things. Like it's just one person's opinion. There are plenty of ideas out there that I thought were terrible that have gone out to be extremely successful. And it's really important to be able to understand that you need to be able to check your gut against facts and data. Honestly, the smartest people I know that I really respect understand the limitations of their own skills, and secondly, of themselves as humans. Like it is impossible to be omniscient, especially in regards to early stage startups. It just really is. It's all about going out and getting real market data, not confirmation bias and saying, would you buy this? And how great of an idea is this? But really trying to get deep insight, unbiased insight into the market. And so that means going out through the customer discovery process over and over again, iterating a little bit each time, testing ideas, and literally using the scientific method, controlling for variables to try and understand what's going on. So, I mean, we could talk for a long time about some specifics, and there's a lot of great info on the internet about that, about the customer discovery process. But that's the biggest thing is to go out there and find actionable data that's sort of essentially irrefutable when you're talking to someone like myself.
Right. I think that's one of the most important things I think early stage founders have to think about, right? Just getting out of your building and kind of like your friend zone and go out there, talk to people you don't know. So they give you that unbiased feedback, right? Because a lot of the times, you're a founder, you talk to your friends and family, they say, oh, it's a great idea because, they don't want to give you honest feedback. And you put something out there, then you're like, oh, well, how come no one's signing up, right? So,
yeah, it's like, well, I always give the example of the waiter at restaurants. When they come by, they're like, how was the food? Everybody says it was great. It could be terrible, but nobody ever says it was
so
great.
True.
Like, at the end of the day, the restaurateur is like, I don't understand. Everybody said the food was great.
Right.
And, but that actually speaks to a specific aspect of customer discovery, which is understanding that you have to go about it very scientifically and trying to remove people's biases. Because if you go out and say, do you think this is a great idea? Even people you don't know are likely going to say, yeah, okay, and go away. And you don't get really good feedback. You have to sort of structure the questions you're asking and how you're going about, whether it's an in-person thing or whether you're doing it in a more mass market way through the internet.
Right, yes.
Doing it in such a way that you're really getting at a core piece of information, like asking, how many times a day do you walk your dog? Like, what's my incentive to lie about that?
Right.
So, I can I'm more likely to get a real response to that than I am to say, do you think this is great dog shampoo? Like your dog to smell like this?
Exactly.
That doesn't give you a really good validating point. It's not actionable data.
Right.
Similarly, asking people kind of what they've done in the past as opposed to predicting what they'll do in the future. Because people aren't very good at predicting what they're going to do in the future.
Exactly.
I would love to think that I'm going to eat only healthy and work out every day, but the reality is I'm not very good at doing that.
Right.
So it's easier to tell what people are going to do based on what they've done in the past than what they think they're going to do in the future.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, we could go on forever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think getting that real data, like you said, I think that's huge. And whether it's throwing a landing page, all these methods as well, talking to other people. I think that's great for validating the ideas. Great. Okay, so let's move on to next questions that we have. So what recommendations do you have for early stage startups to, find those first set of customers? You got some kind of MVP, it works, but how do I go about, finding that first set of users or even customers that would pay for it, maybe if it's an app or that, you know,
Mhm.
that is chargeable based on the MVP. So
Well, I mean, a lot of that kind of ties in as sort of the second step of customer discovery in a lot of ways, and sort of this is the step where you begin to realize why the initial customer discovery process is so valuable. Because in that instance, what you're basically trying to do is just get data, not sell. And by doing that, it allows you to have the information that you need in order when it comes time to start trying to figure out how to generate sales. You understand who your customer is, what the need or problem it is that you're addressing, where that problem or need ranks on that customer's priority list to begin with. Are they actively seeking a solution? What are they doing now for a solution? Where do they hang out online? What are the marketing channels you need in order to reach them? What are the values they're looking for and the messaging that they're looking for? All these little variables that kind of add up to how you go about actually marketing to these people and getting them to basically fill the top of your customer acquisition funnel.
right.
At which point it becomes a little bit more of a sales process. And depending upon a lot of things in your business, whether it's like B2B or B2C and high touch or low touch sales, now you go about kind of refining your sales process of understanding, how are you qualifying leads? How do you start by figuring out what their needs are so that you can repeat them back to them in the sales process essentially and address those directly, and what's the sales cycle time and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So it is, I don't want to make it seem dumb in terms of like do your homework, but like it is really a data game, and it's much more of a process than I think people realize. In terms of, a lot of people like to think about just going out there and pushing as hard as they can and everything. And you can definitely generate some traction, but it's not going to be traction that you can scale. It's not going to be something that you can build upon.
Right.
And so it's important to have that in your mind when you're going through the early traction is, even if you're a great salesperson and can go out there and get a bunch of people and totally fill your day and capacity, if it's not something that you can go and say, all right, now it comes time to raise funds, build a team, and figure out a process to turn it from 10 customers to 1,000.
Right.
If it's sort of scatterbrained, you can't really do that. So you need to be able to, still be, kind of methodical about that approach too.
Right. Yeah, I think going back, it all starts, I think, with that validation phase, right? So and then taking that momentum and getting those early users and really doing all sorts of things with experimentation. So I think, like you said, it's a lot of process and data too, which I think a lot of people actually miss upon on that. So, but I think having those real data actually really helps in terms of everything. What the customers are looking for. Is this scalable? Can you take it to the next level and whatnot? So that's great. Okay, so let's talk about next question is my favorite. What makes a great MVP? We see startups too. I've been there too. We put our first MVP, and I tell you, it was really so many bells and whistles, and like it's just so bloated. The product we had like so many features, and you go out there, you put it, and the customer may be using one feature. So what's your opinion on that?
So the first is I kind of, again, taking a step sort of back from it, and I think that's sort of the beauty of these conversations is when you're an entrepreneur, you're so in the weeds every day, day in and day out. It's really hard to kind of take a third person perspective on this. And so from that point of view, again, looking at it from almost like a process and iterative standpoint,
Right.
MVP isn't a single thing. Your chances are you're going to have a lot of MVPs, and each one might be designed to test a different thing. I mean, you might have one to test an additional feature at some point. You might have one that's testing a marketing channel, or testing, or literally just doing any kind of value proposition validation to begin with. It can kind of vary. So it's really important when you're doing an MVP, it's really more, it's almost part of the customer discovery process at first, and then can kind of be early sales also, but of testing something, because your whole goal with that is to get more insight through it, because eventually you're going to build out a full product.
Right.
but it's sort of through this iterative process that you get to that standpoint. So you start with a single MVP, and all you're trying to do really is test your value proposition.
Right.
It's not a stripped down version of your product. It's the simplest thing that you can create to communicate what you think your value proposition is and get it in customers' hands. Because what you think you're saying when you're just talking to them could be totally different from what they're envisioning. And
Right.
so once they kind of see it, whether it could be a video, it could be a thing made out of cardboard, it could be anything that just sort of better communicates what your value is. You can use that to then validate and add a little bit of complexity, add a little bit of complexity, add a little bit more complexity. And then eventually through this sort of process, you figure out what your first real initial product looks like that you're trying to scale sales with.
Right.
And ideally, that's going to be something that just addresses the value proposition to your early target market.
Right.
You can spend a lot of time adding a lot of features and diving into the tech and making it great.
That's right.
But and it's not, a lot of people say you got to be embarrassed of your first product and that sort of thing.
Right. We heard that. Yeah.
That
We heard that a lot.
Extreme, I think. It has to be something you can legitimately market. Obviously, you can't put a stick out there and expect someone to pay $100 for it. But,
exactly. Yeah.
it just has to be enough that it has the initial value proposition for those core early adopters, so that you can then iterate on top of that, basically get cash in the door and start adding complexity and building out that technology roadmap as you need to.
Right. For sure. Yeah. I think, again, I think it goes back to having that, experimentation mentality, right? Where you're experimenting with your MVP. And I really think it's about just putting it out there and see, what your users are using. And sometimes they say, oh yeah, we're going to use it. But then, when it comes to actually having that product and trying out that feature, you see, oh, they're not even using it, right? So it's all about getting that data again. So
the best companies never stop experimenting and never stop learning.
that's so true. And I heard, and I heard some stat on Facebook even that at any given point, I heard they have over 1,000, plus different versions of Facebook. I mean, how crazy is that, for a well-developed world-class company to, continue to experiment? Like, that's crazy to have so many versions and see what's working with the user, what's not, right? That's incredible. So great. So let's talk about some traction, matrix that, when you are, for the startups that are applying to the program, what sort of things that you look for, besides, having a great team. Are there any other things you look for, whether it's like, pre-launch signups, whether it's like, the MVP, or what kind of tractions you look for in those startups specifically?
Well, so it's metrics are kind of tough when you're talking really early stage, just because there isn't a whole lot to go off of in comparison, right? So that's really, it can be a challenge, and that's a big reason why we tend to focus on the team, is because you kind of have to, that's the biggest sort of metric of success, frankly, is a team who kind of understands that early process. But in terms of market validation, the two things I'm looking at it in terms of both quantity and we'll say quality, like whether engagement or quality of feedback or something that really kind of digs at the value, because it's great. Like if you can come and say, well, we have 50,000 users, but if they're all free and your end goal is to charge $100 a month subscription, that doesn't really, that doesn't communicate to me that they get the value that you're right. So you need to be able to understand that that the market size is out there, but that the market value is also out there. And so I tend to kind of take that a little bit on a case-by-case basis to see what they've done. We work directly with entrepreneurs, even in the middle of an interview, to start basically kind of coaching with them and working with them to see, oh, that's interesting. Have you tried this? And take this assignment. See if you can figure out what this aspect about their customer, or see if you can test out what other people are charging, or what your, what are the alternatives that they're doing? What's the sort of numbers that they're playing with in their mind in terms of pricing, so you can understand how much value you're putting in and that sort of thing. So I try and take it on a very much case-by-case basis. but the two overlying things are both in terms of quantity and quality of market validation that we're diving into.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question.
Sure.
Are there any notable startups from your program? I know you mentioned a few, but yeah, any notable startups we should check out or keep an eye out on them?
Love all of our startups. I hate to like
Oh,
pull
okay.
out
Yeah,
single one,
that is, I
but
love that.
I
That's
will
great.
say that's great. I mean, there's a couple great ones out there too, though, that are really doing well, and I'm happy to do that. But in truth, we try and help guys who are doing really, really well. We'll spend a lot of time on, and even people who are really struggling and still pivoting, we spend a lot of time with too.
Right. Wow, that's awesome. That is something else. That I love that.
So I'll definitely say that some good stuff, but I understand that the key aspect is to kind of get a feel for some of the companies we work with, especially for the people out there.
Sure. Yeah.
So I would check out one. It's called SpinCar. I mentioned them earlier. They're doing
Right.
really well. They sell automotive software, particularly to dealerships. They're a really interesting use case for StartFast too, given the number of pivots they kind of went through to land there.
Wow.
But yeah, it was amazing. They initially started out selling to like catalogs, like fashion catalogs, and then eventually found their way into the automotive market.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right? And it's
That's
awesome. Another one would be called Electronic Gaming Federation. So they're in the esports, and they're basically creating a better version of the NCAA for esports. So
okay.
creating varsity leagues for high school and collegiate sports, esports. Another would be called Toonly. They basically have taken music production online. So whereas typically you have to get all the people together in a physical studio to record your music, and it costs an arm and a leg, especially for people who are kind of just starting out or maybe do this as more of a hobby. Through Toonly, you can do recording with musicians anywhere and kind of put it together, and it's a whole lot cheaper and faster to be able to produce music.
Amazing.
Another company is Wiser, WYZERR. That's how that one's spelled.
Yeah.
And they've kind of gamified customer surveys essentially. So it's really awesome. They have, I mean, just blown away completion rates in terms of market surveys, where typically, you get these things and it's like, oh, choose A or B, and, short answer, long answer, or whatever. And it's like 10 questions. Theirs has a lot more of like putting things into buckets and filling out matrices like a Sudoku, and all sorts of interesting pieces to it that make them a lot more fun and engaging, but also allows companies to get a lot more useful data back from actually completing them, let alone the completion rates.
Right, exactly. Nobody likes to fill those out, right?
No, but they put them on this big screen. It was at one of the Google conferences, and they had a line of like 40 people waiting to fill out a market survey.
Wow.
And I was like, when's the last time you ever heard that happening?
No way. I usually throw those away, right? It's like, I don't really care, right? It's like, nobody wants to sit down and fill those out. It's usually like, oh, which of the following, and like, fill this out, or so that's amazing.
Another great one that just came out of 2017 is called Rep Hike. In fact, they're looking for a sales rep right now. I should mention that.
Perfect. Yes. And we'll let the audience know. What's their website?
Rephike.com. REPHIKE.com.
Perfect.
And basically what they're kind of doing is a unique take on influencer marketing and campus brand ambassador programs.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, a big company like Apple will hire a bunch of students to run some promotional events on campus and that sort of thing. Trouble there being that, first you got to hire you have one person who's hiring hundreds of students across a bunch of different campuses to try and track and manage them. And it's just a huge mess, and you can never really figure out how successful they were.
That's right. Yes.
So they have a platform that allows them to recruit people, to manage their brand ambassadors, and to track performance. But more than that, they've kind of taken it from a different perspective of trying to find influencers on college campuses rather than just hiring people to run promotional events.
Wow, that's amazing.
Leveraging your social network and things like that
to basically promote influencer marketing on college campuses.
Right, which is pretty effective, I feel like, because I do feel like there are students in campuses that are more connected than the others, right? So yeah, so I think
well, the biggest value, frankly, from a brand standpoint, has been that age group is where a lot of lifetime brand loyalties are made.
Right,
like,
that's true.
I want you in there so that you can buy Toyotas and then Lexuses when you're old or something. And
right, that's right.
so that's the point where you establish that loyalty. And so they have a huge value in creating it. But nowadays, when you're trying to make marketing more authentic and, more based on content and engagement and education, that becomes really valuable. So,
awesome.
Really cool companies.
Great. And moving on to next question. You talked about the program, what you guys are looking for, what's so exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about, New York, Syracuse? So I'm probably our audience maybe haven't heard about that. Everybody heard about New York City, right? But maybe tell us a little bit about Syracuse and, lifestyle, things to do.
Sure.
What's it like?
Syracuse is an awesome location. I love it here. It's, in terms of quality of life, it's really hard to beat, let alone cost of living is way lower than what you're going to find in Manhattan or something. Like, we've had companies move to Manhattan and then move back because after they raised a round of funding, they're like, okay, well, why should I have 4x the operational costs to be here when it's not helpful?
Wow.
So that's really cool. But the also nice part is frankly, we're like 4 or 5 hour drive and within an hour flight of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Toronto, Cleveland, Montreal. I mean, it's like half the population of the U.S.
That's right.
Within not that big of a distance of here, which is really a pretty awesome piece. But it's a frankly a great place in that respect to have a company. But we don't have a location requirement. So a lot of our companies come in from all over the world: Germany, India, Brazil, South Africa, Spain, you name it. And Australia, and they'll come here for 3 months, and sometimes they stay, sometimes they leave, but it depends upon what works best for anyone in the company.
Awesome. Great. And for our audience that are interested in your program and they're working on exciting startups, where can they go to learn more?
Definitely startfast.net. I would check that out. You'll find our Fast Thoughts blog on there. You can check out our newsletter. You can also follow me on social media if you want. I'm at James Shomar, JamesShomar, across all platforms. I mean, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm even on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I post a lot on there too. And it's more than just blog posts too. That's all of our info is right up on there. Our application is on F6S.
Great. And the applications are now open, right?
Applications are open. We close them at the end of March.
Okay.
So, please feel free to get them out there and, look forward to reviewing it and hopefully meeting with some of you guys. So.
Awesome. Great. Well, James, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with us about StartFast and your program and all the great tips that you had for startups. And we look forward to sharing this with our audience, and we look forward to hearing more great stories about the program. We look forward to connecting again.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate you having me on and everything. This is a lot of fun.